Haiti's revolution did not begin in 1791. It began the day the first white person went to Africa and began to kidnap people in Africa. They did not just sit down and let themselves be taken away. They fought. They fought all the way to the boat. They fought on the boat. They killed themselves throughout the trip. They killed themselves as they get off the boat or killed whoever was tying them up. So the fight began the day the aggression, the kidnapping, the slave mentality began to capture people. Now, and the fight went throughout, everywhere. It's not just Haiti. That's another false idea that Haiti did a revolution. But Jamaica fought a lot more than we did. Cuba has much more revolts than we did. But Haiti, the difference, Haiti succeeded. And that is what makes the difference. But all the islands in St. Thomas, 3 women freed St. Thomas in 1773, took it away from the Dutch for almost a year before they were recaptured with the help of France and British Army. The Dutch put the island back into slavery and arrested the 3 women. But people don't know about that. Throughout Brazil. So the revolution is all over. It's not the Haitian revolution. The Haitian revolution is just one tip of the revolution against slavery that went throughout the world and received its first major success in Haiti. I would have to say, in the last period, the last string of battles that began in 1492, we have to take 3 characters, 3 major people and their surrounding. We have to take, if we take the man, we'll have to take Bookman Duty, who's from Jamaica, whose mother was a great revolutionary woman, was a Muslim woman. And the reason he's called Bookman, the man of the book, is because his Holy Quran that he refused to give up when they sold him out here. So the slave maker burnt the book on his skin. So he was all burnt up all in here, but the mark of the book stayed here. Why? Bookman. And since he was purchased by Mr. Duty, then his name became Bookman Duty, the man of the book of the duty. Now for us, there is no such thing as chance and hazard. So there is a reason why this man, who's going to come from Jamaica, grow up here, become from a Muslim to a Unga, participate actively in giving, being the what do you call, a tremplin, being what you jump over to push the last battle, if you want, to spring, to propulse, okay, the last battle. So this Bookman Beauty, what is he going to say to us? He's going to say to the Haitian people, God, who has created the sun, who governs the wind, the clouds, he is your father. And he demands that you put an end to this thing here. You must avenge the wrong that has been done to you. Now, we have no other word from Bookman but that one speech that he did on August 14, 1791. So this is the man who brought the word, the clarified word that must be materialized. Fine. And of course, with this, a whole string of fighting and activities begun towards the final march for freedom.
What if I told you the oldest black neighborhood in the U.S. wasn't born from struggle, but from power? Follow if you're ready for the history they never taught. Before the Civil War, before emancipation, there was Treme. In the shadow of the French Quarter, free people of color, many Creole bought land, opened businesses, and dominated local culture. By the mid-1800s, over 80% of Treme's property was black-owned. Let that sink in. While slavery raged across the South, Treme was building wealth, music, resistance moats. Right next to Congo Square, where African drumming never stopped, even under French and Spanish rule. This wasn't survival, this was defiance. Barbers became bankers. Musicians became legends. From brass bands to civil rights marches, Treme gave New Orleans its heartbeat. But today, most only hear of Treme when disaster hits. Hurricanes, poverty, police raids. Why don't we celebrate its rise as fiercely as we highlight its survival? Is America more comfortable with black pain than black power? Did you know Treme was built by free black landowners? Yes or no? Treme isn't just a neighborhood, it's a blueprint. Follow the Bayou Files to honor this legacy. Comment if your people built something beautiful too. And share this because thriving black history deserves the spotlight, not the shadows. What if your neighborhood had a secret court and it wasn't run by the state? Follow the Bayou Files for stories where power wore veils, not robes. Everyone's heard of Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. But what most people don't know, she wasn't the only one. In 19th century New Orleans, secret voodoo courts operated quietly within Black and Creole communities. They weren't just about spells or ceremony, they were systems of self-governance. Voodoo queens, midwives, and spiritual leaders held court in hidden courtyards and candlelit backrooms. They resolved family disputes, protected the community from harm and betrayal, and when necessary, conducted rituals for justice, when no other justice would come. These weren't just spiritual gatherings. They were acts of resistance against systems that refused to protect Black lives, and they worked in plain sight, hidden behind veils, prayer, and rhythm. What if the courthouse failed you, and your only hope was spiritual law? Would you trust your fate to a secret circle? Yes or no? Did you know New Orleans once had underground justice systems led by voodoo queens? These weren't just rituals, they were revolutions in disguise. Follow the Bayou Files to unearth the courts that ruled from within the shadows. Comment if your ancestors found power in spirit. And share this, because justice takes many forms, and some wore white dresses and head wraps.
Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. Divine all blessed greetings and salutations. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. And please join us for our third annual New Orleans International Voodoo Day, May 23rd and 24th, 2026. New Orleans International Voodoo Day promises an inspiring and immersive experience with a diverse lineup of engaging events. Highlights include an educational symposium featuring distinguished speakers from around the world, including a delegation of scholars and spiritual leaders from Benin and Haiti, as well as art exhibitions showcasing voodoo-inspired works by talented local and international artists. The event will also feature a children's program, an Afroecology exhibit, exploring the sacred nature of plants and herbs in voodoo and their role in spiritual practices and their connection to our ancestors. The weekend will culminate in a ceremonial procession to 9 significant sites throughout the city, locations where the enslaved were brought ashore, held, auctioned, and where they later found community and built and created culture. This journey will begin at the transatlantic slave route to New Orleans marker on the moonwalk at the river just behind Jackson Square and conclude with a traditional voodoo ceremony at Congo Square. Additionally, visitors can participate in interactive workshops, community discussions, and opportunities to connect with practitioners and cultural experts. Certainly here in person, live on the ground, but also by way of the internet and many virtual opportunities. This multifaceted celebration offers something for everyone, creating a meaningful space to honor the past, celebrate the present, and inspire the future. And we are certainly grateful and appreciative for those who continue to support and participate in this 9 p.m. Monday through Friday weeknight podcast on a social media site near you, but certainly by way of the URL link wherever you may choose to share and reshare, repost this podcast. Thank you so much, Nina Lloyd, for your attendance and your support. Thank you so much, Daniel Neal, for your continued love and support. And greetings, Hitomi Honda. Thank you so much for coming in and showing some support for us. We certainly appreciate you. I will unmute my co host momentarily. as we pick up from where we left off in previous episodes of this podcast, in the story of sages and sable subjects, white fear, racism, and the demonization of Creole voodoo in New Orleans in the 19th century. By the end of the 19th century, whites had all but managed to successfully demonize voodoo in the American imagination. As the Black church morphed into the prominent role of revolutionary vanguard of Black people during the first half of the 20th century, voodoo's place as a religion of revolution receded. Black Christians, tethered to the salvific model of Black bourgeoisie, adapted some of the racialized stereotypes of voodoo employed by whites a century earlier. Eventually, voodoo became marketably primarily because it was no longer to be feared. Once this occurred, whites seized the opportunity to exploit voodoo once again, this time for the fetish commoditization. Thus, the white man's magic was not the Black man's magic. Today, the American concept of voodoo is displayed in the most profitable of ways. The New Orleans Historic Voodoo Museum entices visitors on its website to explore New Orleans voodoo, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And while certainly an engaging and interesting composite of New Orleans voodoo history, it fails to cover most of the authentic elements of Haitian voodoo or the history of its demonization. Instead, it offers a visual aid to draw in curious spectators, researchers, and those seeking psychic readings. And to say this is a long way from the moments in history when voodoo practitioners in New Orleans were doing the quote unquote devil's work is certainly an understatement. This is not to cast aspirations against the museum, but to illustrate the dynamics of voodoo, both then and now. Voodoo sells in many forms, which is understandable to a certain point. I myself represent authentic voodoo demonstration, both of the Louisiana voodoo kind and the Haitian voodoo demonstration, but also I'm a SAG card carrying cultural performer and actor. I participated in American Horror Story. So there is room for entertainment and creative license while keeping a clear distinction between authentic voodoo, hoodoo, obia, demonstration, and the like. And beyond that, it is a gross exploitation of a religion which Haitian rebels look to as they prepare to die for their independence. Could there be a bigger dichotomy than this? And yet, this is where voodoo retains its power through the memory of resistance. And as one historian notes, in terms of the slaves, condition or black and white relations, magic never significantly altered the status quo, but it gave the slaves and later the freedmen who were effectively denied any semblance of collective power a measure of individual power. Therefore, voodoo never lost its power. It was simply reset for greater purposes. Religion then was never truly the source of white anti Blackness towards voodoo. It was always about power and the attempt to strip it away from those who understood its value in association with freedom. It was only when whites began to feel threatened that slaves would be influenced by the events of the Haitian Revolution that they began to think of voodoo as evil. But voodoo was only evil to those whose deeds were evil themselves. The legacies of Haitian voodoo and late antebellum voodoo in New Orleans have not been extinguished, but remains a symbol of resistance for Black men and women in the diaspora. Indeed, there are those who remain ever vigilant in protecting its power and mystique. Therefore, voodoo shall always be at the core of the Black resistance experience, to be displayed as a foundational element of ancestral veneration and spirit worship. And as I've always said, and forgive me if it sounds Christian, our salvation indeed lies in voodoo and ATR globally, Aboriginal African based traditional religious systems. It is indeed what will bring healing, wellness, wealth, prosperity, balance once again to our community globally and ultimately affect the world population. Greetings and salutations, beloved Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez. Please come on in. And our beloved Elder Reggie. On this platform, we know as Green Soap, the leader of Shrine of the White Cloth. You both can please unmute and come on in.
Hello, everyone in the listening area. Elder Reggie and Divine Prince. How is everyone? Thank you for joining us tonight. Earlier today, I was on TikTok, and this young lady had a TikTok post, and I asked her a question. The question was pertaining to something she had said about cinnamon. And she came back and said, voodoo is a closed house. So I said, what does that mean? And she was like, voodoo is for Black people, and judging from your profile picture and your name, it's not for you. Now, you know what I did not tell her and what I did tell her. And then I told her some more. And then I invited her to come watch our show tonight. But with the advent of social media and so much going on social media surrounding voodoo, hoodoo, all kind of stuff, I think it's kind of getting out of hand. Personally, with all these people who don't really know what they're doing, the Betty Crocker people, and all these people.
Yeah, Sister Toni, can I chime in a little bit on what you experienced?
Yes.
Happy Labor Day, everyone. Divine Prince, once again, a great topic. Sister Toni, I'm gonna try to add some light to what you experienced and to our collective audience. Now, when I stepped away from the New Orleans Spiritual Church and start moving more toward to ATRs, I went what was called the traditional route in Ifa. But when I got back to New Orleans and start reaching out to the general populace, I start running into Lukumi and Santeria practitioners. And most of these practitioners are of Cuban, Dominican, Brazil, persuasion, Hispanics, right? And so they state that they 20 years initiated, 30 years initiated, this, that, and the third. And there was a fight for African Americans who was trying to pick up a tradition that they were separate from, and these gatekeepers from these islands and particular things. And it was a real warfare until it got to me so bad where I kind of just stepped away from traditional Ifa because I didn't want to be arguing with people over I'm doing it wrong or I ain't following the right protocol. So I moved more into another African spiritual system that didn't have the Hispanic influence over it. And I just felt more easy and at peace with that. And I believe you caught some of the backlash of that today, Sister Toni.
And I just basically, I laugh at stuff like that and tell them what I got to tell them, and then I move on. But in the whole scope of things, you can't be closed-minded. I mean, I asked the question. I didn't say nobody was doing nothing wrong. And it was about voodoo, you know. But I'm familiar with, you know, like the Hispanic part of it. My husband was Cuban. He was a drummer. He drummed at a lot of ceremonies in the city. I wouldn't say he followed it at all. He just went and drummed. He knew the ceremonies and everything, because apparently when there was a revolution in Cuba, Castro got rid of all religion except traditional African religions like and Santeria. He got rid of every other religion except the traditional African religions and the voodoo and the hoodoo and stuff like that. And I think he let the Jews keep their religion because nobody wasn't trying to get with them and they wasn't trying to let nobody else in. That was something you had to be born into as far as he was concerned. But he saw religion as a way to divide the people. So my husband was well familiar with all the rituals and the songs and all this, but he didn't practice it. I guess for so long, but till he came to New Orleans, because he left Cuba at 17 and ended up in California. But when he came to New Orleans, he told me it was bringing back all his childhood. But to me, it's not who better, it's not who this, that, and the other thing. You know, I think we should basically try to learn from each other and deal with what we have in common. And like you call them gatekeepers. Gatekeepers. You know, gatekeepers.
Yeah, I see some of this now in hoodoo when you use the word closed system. And I know we brought this topic up before on the platform. People are saying hoodoo is a closed system. I guess meaning what was practiced in the 1819 coming into the 20th century was etched in stone, and now we could go back and do it, but we can't really add or take away. I really don't have the clarity on what closed system is, but I do hear that word being used.
It is a new language. I'll say that, and I'm going to say maybe within the last 10 years, and certainly fueled by the internet. On the one hand, you know, the protection of what's sacred, you know, about the practice and the traditions is rarely present when that's being utilized, because often these same people are these, you know, Google Bing, you know, book research so-called practitioners and are quick to set themselves up as legitimate practitioners in social media. And the typical phraseology is, well, you know, it was in my family, my grandmom and them did it, but nobody talked about it, nobody passed it down, but it's in my blood. And somehow I don't require, you know, mentorship, initiation, training, structure, you know, any of that, but I have a right to gatekeep this. And they're particularly referencing white people, again, not understanding the history of voodoo and hoodoo as it evolved here in Louisiana and then made its way up the Mississippi River into other, you know, regions of the country. Hoodoo, in particular, it is a closed practice, but is an amalgamation of African tradition, indigenous and aboriginal practice, and Christianity practice with some European witchcraft practices, you know, amalgamated in there. Voodoo, whether we're talking about with the U or with four O's, has always been a closed, structured practice more in terms of it being an initiatory practice, one that you must be, invited into and then grow, develop, train with, by way of protocol within the development, of the practice. So in these modern arguments and usages of these words, people are often adopting hoodoo in place of voodoo, whether it's with 4 O's or with the U, because they think it's a free for all, or they think it's something that, I'm Black, so therefore, this belonged to me, and I can, wave some sage around and burn some candles with some, commercially printed labeling on it, and somehow I'm connecting to the spirits, and I'm doing something. And those of us, who've truly been through initiation, knows that it's really not in the implements, it's not in the items, but it's indeed in the blood memory and in the practice through experience of these traditions and the passing on of that knowledge. And that's what the true definition of the closed practice is.
Okay, Divine Prince, great teachings on that. And you opened my eyes up to that. But you touched on something that I would like to just reiterate right quick. And that is what the initiation process does for those who fight against it. It just take you down a path of humbleness. You're humbling yourself to other males or females at that time. And the spirits are watching. And the spirit said, if this person is able to humble themselves, then I can work with them. And that's all initiation is. For whatever the protocol around the initiation, you're basically showing the spirits and your teachers that you are humble enough to take instructions. And today, a lot of people just don't want to humble themselves to nobody. They don't want to be told anything. They want to be their own content creator, their own guru, and shout from the heavens whatever they want to shout, and don't want to be told anything about it if they are in error. And I think that's hurting the whole ATRs in general. I really do believe that. Because what is wrong with humbling yourself, even if it's for a process of a few hours or a few days?
It's a capitalistic, westernized mentality that is now pervasive and global. And it's certainly built into the internet. Sister Toni and I have been watching this since Hurricane Katrina and Yahoo 360. I mean, we've had in-depth conversations about watching the transformers, the shapeshifters, the personality changes, from one platform, because the new advancements were a little slower coming, 20 years ago. And so we could watch the behavior on 360, the names they were using, the personality, what the trending, cultural practices were among, Black people, but ATR inspired folk. And then they'd go on to MySpace and create a completely different identity, a completely different religion, and then as we begin to master blogging, which was challenging to many people at that time, how to research, how to blog, how to find information to talk about. We then saw a generation come up of just these, these clackety, typing fingers in these search engines, who are now regurgitating basically what they're reading, what they're finding. AI certainly is pushing a lot of stuff, to the surface. That's not even necessarily always true. AI is not as reliable, and it's pulling from all information that can be found on the internet. But if it's also being fed misinformation, then that also can come up in your AI usage, in these search engines, So you're right, Elder Reggie. It's not just a Black issue. Certainly, this Western capitalistic, I'm the king of my own castle. I'm the ruler of the world. I can Google it. I can search it. I did my homework. Well, what is that exactly? Oh, well, I searched it, for 5 minutes. I read 3 books. Well, who were the authors? And what was their position on what they were talking about? And there's this, again, it really reaches beyond just how it's affecting us in ATR, because it's affecting our attitude about politics, our attitude about how we live, how we budget, how we spend our money, what we prioritize, all of those things shift. And again, please forgive me for using language that sounds Christian, but there is a rebirthing of the mind. There is a renewal of the spirit and the personality and how you think when you come into quote unquote consciousness. This generation is trying to make consciousness to be a bad word. The opposite of woke is being unconscious.
That's correct. And Divine Prince, if I could tap into, as we speak, as we reach back to what our foreparents done, and with coming out of the spiritual New Orleans spiritual church system, they had a thing in place called ordination. In order for for a minister, if you was coming up the ranks and you wanted to be a minister, you had to go through ordination, which is akin to an initiation. There was a process of cleansing yourself, synchronizing yourself, weighing white, and humbling yourself to your elders as they brought you through whatever process it was through ordination to get you to bishopship, ministership, or like that. But what I'm bringing that up to say, there is a process of humbleness. And people today just don't want to humble down for anything. They want to stand in their truth and battle you eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and just do not want to take instructions or do not want to respect those who walked in the path before them. And it's really not the right way to go about this.
As Divine Prince said, me and him talked about it in depth over the years. And I could say at least we looking at just the 20 years from Katrina, but I could say from the 30 years of me knowing people, Divine Prince would ask me, do I know this person by this name? And I would be like, I have to see them because they didn't change their names. The people change their names so many times and they change what they doing so many times. Oh my God, in this city, I understand growing and learning. I myself, I sat with the Nation of Islam. I sat with the Rastas. I sat with all the other groups and learned and listened, but I did not initiate myself to them. I did not lock myself to them. I just went to them to learn. I listened to the Mormons that came around on a bicycle. I talked to the Sunni Muslims and read the Quran, but Islam wasn't for me. And then when I found my place, I stayed in my place. Because that's my place. But some people, they grab onto it as they're learning it and proclaim it. Oh, so you've been hanging with a bunch of Rastas, so now you Rastafarian.
Overnight.
And then the next year, they've been hanging with some Nation of Islam, so they didn't change their name, put an X behind it.
Overnight.
Before Katrina,
Overnight.
Yeah, before Katrina, it used to be a group of older Nation of Islam followers of Elijah Muhammad. Old men sitting in there drinking coffee. And when I would get off work, I would go in there and sit with them and talk and reason and learn what they had to say. I want to know the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. And they would always tell me, you not no Rasta. You's a Muslim woman. You's a Muslim woman. And I was like, okay, if you say so, okay. I told you what I was. And it's so much the same. That's why I can relate to y'all, because it's the same almost.
Mm-hmm. But Sister Toni,
Celebrate
I
what we
give
have
you
in common.
right, but I clap for you, Sister Toni, because you did show humbleness. Whatever discipline you wanted to learn, you went in there humble, you sat down, and you was open to instructions. I just think that's the right way it's supposed to go. I don't know what's up with these new jacks. These new jacks today, let's say from 2020 after COVID, they just want to read and be subject expert after reading 1 or 2 paragraphs. And then the second phase to that, they want to be argumentative. And how do you combat that? It's almost what you went through today, Sister Toni. The lady was out of order. I don't know her age or who she was,
Well,
but she
she
was
was
out of
young.
order.
Looked like she might have been 20, in her early 20s, maybe.
See? Mm-hmm.
She may have been in
Mm-hmm.
her early 20s, but all I did was ask a question,
Mm-hmm.
about what was said in the video. And she came back like, look here, white woman, we ain't telling you nothing. And then I had to school her on with all the blended families and the race mixing. You don't know really who's white or black until they tell you.
especially in New Orleans.
Because the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I told her was never judge a book by its cover
Mm-hmm.
before I lit into her. That was the first words I text back. Never judge a book by its cover. Yeah, and especially, in New Orleans, and really not just New Orleans. I mean, Mississippi got it, but not as prominent. I mean, a lot of our ancestors came from other Gulf Coast cities like Alabama and Mississippi and settled in New Orleans because they found more people that looked like them here. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
So, even
Mm-hmm.
in Memphis, it surprised me when I went to Memphis. I was like, wait a minute, where all the light skinned people at? I tell you, everywhere I went, I was the lightest person. Ty, remember that time we went in the grocery store in African dress
Yes, indeed.
and scared the hell out of all them people? When I tell you we was in complete garb,
Mm-hmm.
the looks we got, the clutching of the pearls, the clutching of the purses, the outright mouth hanging wide open, dropped on the floor, like, what in the hell? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They have to open their mind to a lot of things. They have to do a whole lot more studying before you jump off into what you're gonna be. You have to go to the root. They don't want to go to the root. They want to go to the flower. They
Mm-hmm.
want to go to the flower and push the bee off. They want to be at the top. They didn't start at the root trying to find out. And the roots are many. They spread in a lot of different ways. And you have to follow that root. I mean, like for 5 years, I had a California king waterbed. I had my little corner of the
Mm-hmm.
bed to sleep in. And all the rest of it was books, notebooks, dictionaries, encyclopedias. I'm reading 2 or 3 books. I'm cross-referencing. I got 3 different Bibles on my bed. Nothing but books and a little bit of corner I slept in. I wake up in the middle of the night with a thought. I had to write it down so I can look it up and see what happened. My mind was always going. You have to study so many different areas to get
Mm-hmm.
to that thing that you want to be, especially if it's religion. People, I don't know why, but I ran into a lot of people that graduated from seminary. They got the seminary here in Gentilly. And I would
Mm-hmm.
ask them, I say, well, what you did in the seminary? And they was like, well, we studied the religious books. I say, oh, you read the lost books of the Bible? You read the Quran? You read this? No. You read the book? No. They read the King James Version is what they teach them out of, and that's what they know. And they don't further go to look toward anything else, because you're going to find some things mentioned in the King James Version that's also mentioned in the Quran and also mentioned in the Book of Mormon, and definitely mentioned in the books that they took out. So you call yourself a minister, but you don't even know about the books they took out the Bible? To me, I can't understand that. If I'm going to research something and learn something and profess to be something, I got to look at it from the pros, the cons. I got to talk to somebody that's for it, somebody that's against it, and weigh out and find out what's in the middle.
Great topic. Great subject, Sister Toni. And I appreciate you for that, because you put your work in, and you bring excellent research and knowledge to the show. And I see why now. I didn't know that hidden gem of you studying like that and carving out your own space was a part of your repertoire, but it shows hard work do pay off. But with that, we're gonna close it out. We're running out of time. But Sister Toni, like sometimes you leave me with a question. I want to leave you with a question before I close. The question is, this is something I seen on Instagram today. Some people went to watch this new movie called Conjurer, is the name of it. And the question I have for you, in this thing, they're showing people in the audience getting possessed. My question to you, Sister Toni, is that possible?
We'll talk about it on tomorrow night.
But it's tomorrow. There you go. Okay. Thank you. Lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave through the same chain of social division. With that, we say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Good night, everyone. We love you. And we'll be giving updates on upcoming events. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, AYIBOBO.
What if I told you 10,000 enslaved people in Alabama vanished in a single night? 1863, middle of the Civil War. Plantations went to bed full. By sunrise, ghost towns. This wasn't chaos. It was the most organized escape in American history. Months of secret planning. Hidden trails only the enslaved knew. Underground routes spanning 3 counties. They moved like an army without making a sound, leaving tools out, fires burning, beds still warm. It looked like they evaporated into the night. The masters called soldiers, bloodhounds, bounty hunters. They found nothing. Because you can't catch people who know the land better than you ever will. Historians call it the night slavery broke itself. They didn't wait for Lincoln. They freed themselves, and most were never caught. If they won't teach it, we will. Hit follow.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this right in my DNA, yeah, I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees, it's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Oh, do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, you only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. We are the children of the